Manga is a Japanese art form that encompasses drawn cartoons, comic books, and graphic novels. However, it is quite different from their non-Japanese counterparts. While most Western individuals may refer to manga as the Japanese variant of the comic strip, they could not be more off the mark, as this is a heavily biased view. If manga is simply the Japanese version of the comic strip, then it is implied that the title of the true comic strip belongs to European and American comics, removing value from the Japanese medium. By reducing it to just a different version of comics, individuals disregard all the historical and cultural aspects that have formed manga into what it is today. Therefore, I want to take you on a journey and give you an insight into what makes manga stand out among the rest. Firstly, I will address one of the obvious stylistic choices in manga. Anyone who has ever picked up and attempted to read manga has probably noticed that words are not organized in the same way that one might be used to. Unlike English, manga is read from right to left, essentially making the reading reversed to what one would experience in English comics. This is because traditional Japanese writing is written vertically and from right to left. Most manga adapt this traditional way of writing, both across the page and within the panels, as you'll start at the top right panel, reading from top to bottom and right to left, as you make your way across the page. By adhering to this style of reading, manga is able to create a unique experience that is only possible within the medium. Even if some things might be lost in translations, this reading style is always maintained to keep the translated manga as close as possible to the original, so that readers abroad can experience a bit of Japanese culture. Secondly, another stylistic choice that is common in manga is the lack of colors. While most Euro-American comic books have beautifully colored characters, panels, and pages, manga prefers to use only black and white shading. One might believe that due to a mangaka's tight working schedule, they are unable to color their pages, but that is not necessarily true. If mangaka's lack of time was the only reason to use black and white shading, then why would manga such as Berserk and Vagabond have such stunning visuals? The art present in both of these manga is incredibly detailed and clearly time-consuming, meaning that time restrictions cannot be the reason why all manga is black and white. Of course, while that may be the factor for some, if not most, mangakas, manga is made in black and white because of the tradition that arose during the Second World War. Back then, manga had taken on its black and white form because issues had to be released to soldiers quickly. But nowadays, mangakas choose to use black and white in their manga as a stylistic choice. What started off as a way of continuing tradition has become a staple of the manga industry, which has given manga its unique aesthetic and style. Here in the West, some of the most prominent genres of comics are superhero, science fiction, comedy, and horror. But while these genres are very much present in manga as well, Japanese publishing has one very different genre distinction. Genre in manga is heavily catered towards the reader's gender, essentially making gender and genre equivalent. Today, manga tends to be divided into two main categories: boys manga, which is called shonen manga, and girls manga, which is shoujo manga. Of course, there are multiple subsections and offshoots within those two, such as josei, older girls manga, and seinen, older boys manga. But shonen and shoujo are the most prevalent genres and the ones that I will be focusing on. This concept of gendered genres is an incredibly important thing to keep in mind, since style in manga can very easily be swayed into one direction depending in which one of these genres it is in. For example, shonen manga typically features lots of action, comedy, and some coming-of-age tropes, meaning that a lot of the stylistic focus will be put into those aspects. On most occasions, shonen manga will emphasize on making the fights look visually incredible by utilizing the shades of black to their advantage and potentially using the unique stylistic possibilities that can only come with manga. For instance, the mangaka for Fire Force used a technique that would not be possible on any other medium. In this page, they utilize what seems to be a singular brushstroke to emphasize the speed and the grace of this character's attack. Moreover, the blood that splatters from the wound complements the brushstroke as it appears in the form of an ink splatter instead of the regular blood splatters that we would normally see in his or any other manga, showcasing one of the unique stylistic choices that is available for mangakas to use creatively. On the other hand, shoujo manga typically shines a spotlight on the relationships between leads, as well as a focus on facial details and extravagant decoration. Thus, a lot of emphasis in the shoujo manga style is placed upon these features compared to shonen manga. And instead of using jagged and rough lines that are typical of shonen, shoujo features smoother flowing lines and flowery decorations as part of its unique style. In fact, the shoujo style has become so unique and iconic that most people in the manga community can recognize the shoujo manga right away, especially since shoujo manga likes to emphasize emotions with their decorative panels. In The Young Master's Revenge, there are multiple shoujo stylistic choices that occur in the first chapter alone. For example, when the protagonist looks at the female lead, the panels are accompanied by flowers to showcase the beauty of the girl. Whenever the two of them are happy, there are sparkles or glowing puffs of light surrounding them. And there are even some panels that are decorated with a combination of flowers and glowing lights, which goes to show how ingrained these features have become in the shoujo manga style, as they appear quite often per chapter. One of the quintessential aspects of the manga style would have to be the enormous eyes that characters tend to have. You could even say that this is one of the most iconic stylistic choices that manga has, because even individuals who know next to nothing about manga or anime recognize the style. Interestingly enough, the reason behind the big eyes originates from a Japanese proverb that would roughly translate to, "The eyes say more than the mouth." Therefore, the enormous eyes that are present in manga are a trait that they have taken on from their culture. By enlarging the size of the eyes, mangakas can portray emotions without using even a single line of text and letting the visuals take the lead in expressing the character's intentions. Which brings me to my next point. Manga is a visual medium, and unlike Western comics, manga tend to have panels and pages of nothing but visual elements. A personal problem I have with Western comics is that narration boxes can very easily get in the way, especially when they're stuffed to the brim with text. Not only do the narration boxes take away from the visual experience, but they can also very easily disrupt the flow and momentum of reading. This often slows down the speed at which a reader can enjoy the story, as one is forced to read every line of text that is present. However, these squared narration bubbles almost never appear in manga, as they prefer to stick to visual narration. By doing so, manga is always able to retain the flow, as the reader never has stopped to read a ridiculously long narration or speech bubble, as that can easily happen in Western comics. Of course, I'm not saying that all manga are objectively superior to comic books in terms of visual elements, but I do want to outline the differences in style. Manga often relies on visuals to carry the story forward, while the text helps to contextualize and provide information. On the other hand, Western comics instead feel more like graphic novels, with the word novel fitting quite well because the standard Western comic book style is seemingly more reliant on text, leaving the visuals as a secondary focus. Instead, in manga, text and visuals feel as though they're on the same level. Of course, This could have been a product of the publishing style of the two different mediums, as mangakas usually have around 30 pages to work with per week, while Western authors have about 20 per month, meaning that Western authors would have to cram as much information as possible into their panels and pages, contrasting the visual emphasis that is present in manga. In fact, manga can at times have multiple panels and pages of simply visual aspects, letting the visuals take over the job of the text. For example, in this double-page spread from Haikyuu, the visuals take over the entire page while there are only two small speech bubbles present at the very bottom. Here, the symbolic bird flying with the protagonist creates a stronger image than a narration bubble would, stating that he was soaring into the sky like a bird. Additionally, because Western comics are so heavily reliant on narration and speech bubbles, sometimes there seems to be a dissonance between the action and the words. In this fight, Wonder Woman and Doomsday seem to be having a heated battle. If translated into an animation or movie, these two punches would roughly take about 3 to 5 seconds. Yet, in the page, Wonder Woman is able to excrete a full conversation which would take almost 20 seconds to speak. This creates a choppy feeling between action and text, as Western comics seem to shove as much text as possible within a panel. Manga, on the other hand, can easily use multiple panels of nothing but visuals to create a certain flow. For example, in this page from the Hajime no Ippo manga, while there is no narration or speech bubble, the reader can feel the impact of each punch. Additionally, because each strike has its own panel, it creates a smooth flowing reading rhythm as your eyes make their way down the page as you mentally hear the impact of every single hit. The Euro-American comic book standard relies on the use of square and rectangular panels, while it seems as though manga tries their best to use panels in their favor by changing them to a shape that can enhance the reading experience. In fact, mangakas tend to be more creative with their paneling styles and use them both diegetically and non-diegetically. For example, in Witch Hat Atelier, panels are used in a myriad of creative ways to enhance the reader's experience. In this scene, our young protagonist sneaks in to see how magic is created for the first time in her life. She's afraid and knows that it is wrong, but her fascination for magic leads her to look. In the next page, we can immediately see that there are two panels overlapping on each other, creating both a sense of concurrency and slowing down the pace at which the reader admires along with the protagonist. The paneling in this page is all connected and leads the eyes from one panel to the other, similar to how the protagonist is trying to take it all in. Additionally, mangakas can also use their paneling diegetically. In another panel from Witch Hat Atelier, the man is leaning on the panel itself, meaning that the mangaka was able to turn the panel into a physical existence for the character to interact with in the story world, while still maintaining its usual non-diegetic effect of boxing in the characters, demonstrating one of the creative uses and unique styles of paneling in manga. So, what makes manga special? Well, manga is an incredibly unique medium of literature. Most, if not all, of its iconic stylistic features originate from Japanese culture. From its distinctive reading method to its use of black and white shading, manga has always been connected to its Japanese roots. In fact, the eccentric style of manga has only become more recognizable over time as mangakas continue to reinforce established stylistic choices while continuously pushing its boundaries. This is especially important because manga is a visual medium that prioritizes the visual elements before the textual ones, meaning that manga can never be the Japanese variant of the comic strip as it is simply too different. The areas of focus, target audience, cultural influences, and so many more things set manga apart from any other type of comics. Manga specializes in its distinctive stylistic choices to bring stories to life. Stories about anything and everything. Stories that are filled to the brim with action-packed moments or that have a heart-throbbing romance. Stories about giant robots or an office worker complaining about their job. These are the tales that manga brings to its audience with its telltale black and white coloring. These are the narratives that are given creative and rhythm-inducing panels. These are the visuals that make up the pages, and this is what makes manga special.